Hi, good morning, Marco. Good to see you.
Good morning, Chris. Good to see you as always.
So what I want to explore today is how we think hotels, which are top-end hotels, are going to change in nature as we come out of this crisis, but with a particular emphasis on resorts, because I think resorts particularly will have to change the kind of level of services they provide, be far more encompassing, and actually give a greater experience to guests as they come. Because the argument is when people now will travel to resorts, they want to stay on site and not actually leave or have any potential danger at all. And having your experience, having run two of the world leading resorts out in Italy, I'm particularly interested in explore how you think the guest experience is particularly going to change during this period of time. So your opening thoughts on that, please.
Absolutely, Chris. Well, the pent-up demand for relaxation, escapism, wanting to find an alternative or a parallel world to what everybody has experienced over the last several months is a pent-up demand for a service, a type of hospitality that actually everybody craved for before, but it became even more apparent during this period of crisis. We have the privilege of being in touch with many of our colleagues between Italy and Sweden, where of course they have adopted a different strategy, perhaps controversial, but indeed quite different from the rest of Europe. And our colleagues in Italy have now been open for several weeks. And I've spoken with a number of them over the last few days. And it's incredible that the feedback has been, for Italians, has been rather consistent. Everybody was expressing the same feelings. And what colleagues have done, of course, have spoken to quite a number of guests that were enjoying the services before, and if we can say the now, the after. And the common denominator was that everybody was saying what we are looking for is to be hugged, metaphorically speaking, of course, with correct physical distancing, to be hugged, to be cared for, and even more than before, we are looking for that smile. Now, regardless of the fact that smile may be behind a mask, of course, we know that you can smile behind that. And guests are craving for that degree of normality. So that is the first aspect. And interestingly, when the question was asked, so once things will be normal again, if we can call it the new normal, what would you like to see in the resort of the future? And again, quite a consistent feedback from a wide variety of resorts across Italy has been, actually, we're looking for the same, which is the ability for us to escape from the reality that we had to endure over a long period of time. And the sentence that's been used quite consistently, reclaiming our life, basically going back to what we are used to. And what we are used to is a high degree of personalized service. So that then takes us into the services, the hospitality of the future in resorts. The experiential hospitality has already been on the take for a number of years. But during my tenure of Roccaforte Verdura resorts, over the last few years, we've seen that it wasn't just enough to entertain guests. We had to provide a lot more than that. Entertainment in one way is one way. You produce entertainment and the receivers enjoys it. Guests were looking for interaction. We're looking for growth. We're looking for intellectual stimulus. We're looking for a meaningful interaction where at the end of their holidays, they actually had the opportunity to grow, to learn something. Hence, putting together what probably has been considered as the most comprehensive entertainment program of any resort in Europe, with sports academies, with musical entertainment, with craftsmanship, with artisans' masterclasses, that has now grown exponentially to a point where children and adults are booking resorts on the basis that their entertainment and growth program is greater than ever.
You know, I love Madeira. I thought that was a lovely operation. It really was. And actually, you did get a feel for the Sicilian culture whilst you're there, and particularly Sicilian produce. And I suppose that's one of my thoughts. Because actually, what you said in your opening statement, there's quite a lot of things we should explore. One of my thoughts, though, is actually as we go forward, hotels are going to have much more of a bigger role to play in being a voice for their local cultures and communities. And actually, they can become almost the ambassador, a global ambassador for their communities, and tell that cultural story, which probably hasn't happened so much in the past, has it?
Well, the language that you're using is very apt. If we're taking two resorts that I had the privilege to serve for a number of years, Borgo Ignazia, leading hotels of the world in Puglia, in the south of Italy, we created the concepts of the local advisors. The local advisors were basically well-educated, informed, young individuals, highly professionals, but not the stereotype of an hotel concierge. There were people that were truly embedded into the local culture. And so that's the first part of the term, local. And advisor, their job was to go around the resort, engage with the guest pre-arrival and during the 2-week stay, to really understand the needs and wants of each family, of each individual, of each child, and indeed trying to create a program and tailoring a program of culture, of gastronomy, of entertainment around the preferences of each family, and then truly embedding that program with the local community. So we had situations where you could have gone into Francesca's house. Francesca was the aunt of one of our team members, to learn how to make handmade orecchiette. Or you'll be taken to the local cheesemonger to learn how to make burrata. Those are experiences that money can't buy. Indeed, when we created the new villa concept at Roccaforte Verdura Resort, we didn't want to organize a butler for every villa. We thought, what can we give that will transcend the whole idea of engaging with the local community? So a new name for you, slightly difficult, is Ucanuscituri. This is not even Italian, it's Sicilian. And if you think about the semantic, canuscituri is actually a connoisseur. It's basically the person that knows where to go in the local area. But we recruited a very eclectic group of volunteers, if we can call them that way, an ex-psychologist, a doctor, a former engineer, a farmer. And by studying the profile of each family that would stay in a villa at Verdura, we would assign the most relevant Ucanuscituri to spend a day with the family on the first day of arrival, and then creating an entirely curated program around their desire to engage with the community. So we had American guests milking goats. We had British guests going to the Planeta winery and oil makers to actually make olive oil. And we had guests planting olive oil trees.
Fantastic. No, absolutely. And actually, that's what I can see becoming more. I think service is going to become more and more important. Because actually, although people are saying that people want safety, I think they want the interaction again as they come back in hotels. I think the service particularly is going to be the big differential.
Indeed. When we are looking at the meaning of service,
Always the way, always the way, you know.
It's always the way. And we thought that we switched everything off. Indeed, service was already been transformed in the last few years. But now, if we're thinking about the concepts of the local advisor, of the conoscitori, of especially in villa services, where we have ladies, mamas, that cook for you, but don't cook out of a restaurant menu, but they cook out of their own recipes that have been adapted to ensure that the international tastes has had the opportunity to acquire a new taste. So that kind of service sees the resort of the future moving towards an opportunity to feel safe, secure, and enjoying an oasis of safety, calm, and tranquility, from which to break from whatever reality we may be experiencing until the moment of arrival. And from that point, the resort becomes a safe hub from which to explore the local communities. Hence, the development of more of curated services, where the traditional concierge is no longer the person that books the same tickets for a number of VIPs, but actually there is a large number of personal concierge that are looking after individuals. So talking to a colleague that is running a beautiful resort in Tuscany, literally yesterday, he was saying that he had to double the number of guest relations people over the last 3 weeks. Because individual guests didn't want to go around reception areas, waiting to interact with the reception team. They wanted to have a one-on-one personal clinic to say, I don't want to venture out into an unknown restaurant. Where can you take me? Where can we go to live and experience? So we will see more and more guests wishing to experience the local community, but from the safety of the organization provided by the resort, where all these services have been curated, have been vetted, have been tested, and indeed organized in such a way that people feel safe, but also they feel free to experience without having in the back of their mind, am I doing the right things by venturing out of a resort?
I understand that. I think that's why I think it's going to be really quite exciting in some ways. You mentioned Sweden. You've just been in Sweden for a week or so. And how did you find the Swedish take? You talked about the Italian take. What was the Swedish take on what's going on at the moment?
Indeed, Sweden feels not like a different country, but it feels like a different world. Indeed, the criticism that Sweden has received by the international community is perhaps unfounded, but we're neither scientists, and indeed, I'm sure that in a year's time, the jury will be out on which strategy actually was better. But what I think is very important, and I'm going to connect, if I may, my experience of Sweden with my experience of Italy and some feedback that I've recently received, is about an important issue, one that you know that is very close to my heart, and is the aspect of mental health. By enduring, quite rightly so, a full lockdown, millions of people have been confined in many, many cases to very small spaces, experiencing, in a way, crowding, experiencing emotional hardship. And while the British community is famous for being stiff upper lip, and of course we can endure, and we will come out as the winning team at the other end, it has been a long time. Sweden has adopted a different strategy where they looked at the overall health and well-being of their country and made a decision. And that decision was based on the bigger picture and not just on this particular pandemic. The result of that is that, generally speaking, we've seen a compliant community that is naturally following the directions and the instructions of their government, but without enduring a full lockdown. The result of that is that while, of course, the hospitality industry is not thriving, I repeat, is not thriving, however, they've been managing to survive in such a way where restaurants and hotels don't feel like ghost towns, but are places where people are feeling comfortable to go to because there is a modicum of physical distancing that most people actually respect. If we take the island, the beautiful island of Sandham, where normally in the summer you have the boat races, it felt like the pandemic never existed. But again, in a very Swedish way, it was so controlled and so well organized that actually you realized that there was more space between people, but there was the same amount of people that you would have experienced in the previous years. And this is quite important. Resorts are made for families, are made for individuals, and part of the families you have a large children community. Consistently, the kids clubs operators that we've been working very closely with over a number of years, their feedback over the last few days has been quite astonishing. They have captured a very definite change in mood. Children arrived in the kids clubs of resorts quite lacking that spring on their step, lacking that childlike enthusiasm. It was almost as if they came out of a highly confined space and they weren't used to being playful, to be engaging with other children. So the resort operators are now finding themselves having to work even more in a psychological way to help children to come out of their own environment of what they believed was the normal to a new normal. And that will change quite dramatically the way the activities will be carried out. Indeed, flying back from Italy to Sweden, what we have seen is that cause and effect of this particular aspect. There is no evidence of that. So in a way, the hospitality industry in Sweden has managed to carry on, relatively speaking, as normal, and been able to continue to have families engaging with the hospitality providers in a more relaxed way. Probably over the long term, that will provide a benefit to the overall community.
Well, it's really interesting, isn't it? And as you rightly say, it'll be in a year's time when people start making the judgments, where we'll be able to see which one worked, which one didn't work. But the well-being piece is actually in the UK seems to be one of the biggest issues about getting people back into the major cities. Because actually there's people obviously saying, why should I take the risk to get on public transport? Why should I take the risk to get on trains? But actually, as you rightly say, one of the other sides of it is younger people being in city bedsits, city flats, and house shares, they're actually dying to get out and start re-embracing life. So it's going to be a real challenge. In terms of Scotland, bringing all this together, how do you see the Scottish sector changing, perhaps, and adapting as we go through this?
Well, Scotland is blessed with, from a resorts point of view, from open spaces, with spaces that actually perhaps we haven't appreciated as much in the past. This is a blessing and is also a way of life. If we're taking about the demographic of Scotland and the concentrations of people around, apart from the two big cities as Glasgow and Edinburgh, Scotland topography is as such that in the main, resorts are blessed with quite a lot of space. And space is important. Space is important not just because you can practice government directives and instructions in a more relaxed way. But space is important because, as you just said, if you have lived in the confined space of a computer screen with 5 or 6 Zoom calls a day, opening your perspective and wishing to see trees, wishing to see the sea, wishing to see indeed magnificent golf courses, that already is enabling the psyche of the guest to feel better. So I believe that hospitality is playing, will be playing even more, a substantial role in encouraging people to go back to what they've missed. Because, of course, there is a price to pay. And the price is how do we get from A to B in a safe way. But of course, we may not rush back to the supermarkets because the online delivery that some people may have tried once or twice in the past has now become the new norm. But if you take the overall risk factors that we unconsciously contemplate on a daily, weekly basis, how many risks do I want to take this week? Am I going to take a risk by shopping in a supermarket? Or am I going to take a risk because I'm going to enjoy back my very favorite meal in my very favorite restaurant, or indeed a wonderful weekend in my favorite resort in Scotland, because I know that once I get there, I am safe, I'll be treated with that metaphorical hug, welcome back. And at that point, that smile, that tailored service is becoming even more important than before.
I think that's absolutely right. And it goes back to that bit, which is actually the other part of the key conversation, it's about risk, isn't it, which you're touching on. What is it that's going to make you take risks? We need people to start taking risks to get the economy ticking over again, don't we? So how it is that balance, because actually the risk level is coming down, but we still need to, people are still afraid. We've created a negative psychology on this.
Absolutely. And the narrative that we have experienced over a number of months through the public conversations that we've been engaging with has been a rather doom and gloom narrative. So it is fair to say that we, the British public at large, have been relatively scared. And this has been embedded in our own thinking on a day-to-day basis. And this is where I may draw a parallel, indeed, with Sweden, where the public is not scared, is aware. And there's a big difference between the two, because when you are rationally aware, you're able to make rational decisions, also based on your priority lists. Do I want to escape and go into the local port and enjoy a fantastic meal and then set my sailing boat and go out and experience that fantastic mental well-being that we'll experience over the weekend? Or is the narrative that I have experienced or endured over the last few months so strong, and like the Romans say, gutta cavat lapidem, you know, the drop of water that eventually makes an indent into the rock? Has our confidence been affected so much that we're beginning to have doubts if we can or cannot do things? So I think that over the next few weeks, over the next few months, hospitality has an important, very important role to play in changing that narrative and not taking the risk away, because of course, for as long as we don't find a vaccine, that risk will remain there and even beyond, but is about rationally describing or co-creating experiences that will reduce the risk level to a point where we at large as the citizens will feel much more comfortable to go and experience hospitality services. That in turn will help us to improve again our mental well-being that has been under great strains over the last few months.
No, I understand that. And what's the atmosphere in Italy? Because you talked about the Swedish. How's the atmosphere in Italy changing?
The atmosphere is that once people have arrived in resorts, within, I wouldn't even say half a day, a few hours, and it's rather remarkable. For Italians, the physical distancing has been respected, and this is the feedback that I'm genuinely receiving by a number of colleagues. There is the occasional guest that wishes to hug and kiss, but there is a very polite sort of, oh, let's just do the elbow kiss, which creates great hilarity. But actually what we are seeing is the clustering of people. So people that you have met over a couple of days at the initial stage of your holiday, suddenly they have become the people that you can trust, because if they are in the resort with me, that means that they are safe too. So the tables of 4, as in mother and father and 1.5 children, have suddenly become table of 8 or table of 9, because 2 households have got together. No more than that. So there is a very interesting social dance where people are craving for that social interaction. They're initiating dialogues and conversations, and then finding themselves asking the management, can these 2 families have dinner together? It's rather beautiful.
So how do you see the road out now? What's your prediction? I mean, I know you've obviously listened to some of the webinars we've been doing with all the forecasts. What's your forecast in terms of how you see the road to recovery?
My personal forecast, and it's a very personal forecast, and yet based on some green shoots of feedback received literally over the last few weeks. But not just talks among the hospitality professionals and practitioners, because we may have a skewed view, but is really listening to the guests that are booking traditionally 5, 6, 7 outings per year. And that is generally speaking, you know, a couple of half-terms holidays and then a number of short breaks throughout the year. I see the summer 2021 as a booming summer. People are saying, whatever we have not spent this year because we couldn't, and now we've rushed into a short holidays just because we were able to, next year we want to go back to normality. And the expression that I think I referred to earlier on, it was, we want to reclaim our life back. And our life was made of hard work, but many pleasant holidays. So our role is to listen even more than before, and not trying to run our services in the tight way that we're forced to do now, because there is a danger there. Of course, we have lost a lot of money. And the financial strain on businesses is greater than ever. But already there are signs that team members are under great stress because they've been asked to perform what in the past was performed by 3 times as many colleagues. That is not sustainable. So there is a danger here that we could come out of this summer thinking, well, we did it for this first summer, we can do it for the second one. The public, the guests will not forgive us for that. So it will be a booming summer 2021, as long as we remember that good service, fantastic hospitality can only be provided with the right ratios between team members and, of course, our beloved guests.
I think that's right. Now, we're running out of time, so I've got to finish on a lovely, sweet story, because your son has become a budding chef, hasn't he, during this period? And so, and ends up having an article in the local local newspaper. Is that right?
Well, my youngest son has had a privileged early life. He was allowed in, with all the safety measures, he was allowed in pastry kitchens in a number of resorts during my various tenures, in areas that even I wasn't allowed in. So he got very close with a number of chefs, both in Scotland, London, and of course, Italy and Sweden. So he has developed as a budding baker and chef to be, from a young age of 7, 8 to he's now 11, a special relationship with chefs. But most importantly, the kids club operators, that during the period of lockdown where resorts and hotels were closed, they had to think on how are we going to engage with the hundreds, thousands of children that we normally engage with. So they created a special section of their Kids Club website called the Young Chef Apprentice. And young Rocco is the chef that is delivering webinars on how to make chocolate brownie. So we'll skip that. I believe that the next one will be a risotto.
That's absolutely brilliant. And actually, that's one of the hopes that people come. I know you're a great foodie yourself. It's one of the hopes that a lot of people have is out of this comes a real new passion for cooking at home and a real new passion for cuisine in the UK.
Absolutely. And, you know, a number of people have said, oh, because of this passion of cooking at home, people will not want to go back to restaurants. On the contrary, people heightened interest in food produce, in ways of cooking, will want them to go back out again and really compare notes. So the roles of the chefs is not going to be just enough to present a beautifully cooked meal with wonderful produce. The role of the chef will be to engage with the guests and talk about that recipe and giving tips and giving, so almost like a mentoring sessions on, okay, now that you've experienced the perfect dish, I'm going to teach you how to attempt to make it at home. And that relationship is going to grow.
Oh, I agree. I think it actually, after we get through this initial very hard period, it could be a great time for us to start.
It will definitely be.
Well, look, thank you for your time today, Marco. It's been a real pleasure talking to you as always.
My pleasure.
And I look forward to seeing you soon.
See you very soon.